whether you're doing an advanced project or a simple project, whether it's for a report or whether it's just for sort of a preliminary look at your data, this is a set of commands that you really can't not be aware of. When we talk in statistics about things like measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion or variability, whichever language you want to use, there are a simple set of commands that we often come back to. And you might recall your measures of central tendency include things like the mean, the median, the mode. Your measures of dispersion or variability include things like the standard deviation, the range, the interquartile range, or the variance. And what I'm going to demonstrate in this video is the one command which is going to basically allow you to pull all of that information together. So you can see here up on the screen, I've got a subset from the 2016 General Social Survey data set. There's only about 9 variables here. Now that's as compared to the full General Social Survey data, which has over 1,000 variables in it. Why did I do it this way? Well, in part, I just wanted to be able to have a couple of important variables right up at the front, which would make for ease of use, and of course, at the same time, allow us to very quickly understand what the variables are about. So here we are in the data view range. If I want a better understanding of the actual data, I would come down here to the bottom left, select variable view, and from there I can take a look at what I've got listed. Now, the variable names are actually pretty descriptive in regards to the actual variable, but if I want, I can go up here with the label, and you can see where it says label and where it says values. My labels have been cut off. There isn't enough room. But if I put my cursor right there in between the label and values, right on that column line, I can click, hold it, drag it over to the right, and that's going to allow me to see the actual label for the variable. Now, I've gone through and I've made a few edits to some of these labels for ease of use, but at the same time, it's not really all that different than you would see from the actual General Social Survey data file. The other important consideration as well here to making sure we understand our data, and this is going to become important in a minute when we actually have to interpret those descriptive statistics, is we want to know that our values are over here in that next column, which is labeled values. What that tells us is particularly important for our categorical data, because this is going to actually tell us what the values stand for. So remember, anytime we use SPSS, the data is not being recorded in anything but numeric data, unless of course the variable is a string variable. So for example, if I've got the name of the state, name of a county, whatever it is, that'll have to record a string. But for the most part, most of the data, for a number of reasons, one is going to be space, the other is going to be to ensure less opportunities for data entry errors. Most of our data is going to be reported as numeric values. Now, those numeric values are going to stand for something when they're categorical in nature, and you can see right away for row number 4 here, sex, which is the respondent sex, you can already see that the value label is being, is visible in this sense, one being representing male. And if I click here in that cell, you're going to see 3 dots pop up here in this button on the right. And if I click that, it actually shows me all of my different value labels. So 1 is male and 2 is female. And as I said before, it's important for us to know where to find this information, because when we get this back in terms of some of those descriptive statistics, it's not going to use the labels, it's going to use the numeric values. And if we don't know what they stand for, well, we're not going to know how to interpret those. So let me cancel out of this. And so the one command that I would go to get all of the different information I've talked about already, it's going to be up here under Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and that very first option right there called Frequencies. And that's going to be it. So we'll select that. And you're going to see here, once again, and we've seen this before with SPSS, and I'm going to drag this out a little bit to make it a little bit easier to see. So I'll pull that over here on the left and the right. And so I can now take a look at the variable name. And again, those names reflect what we see here as the label from the variable on the variable view sheet. Now for each of the variables I want to look at descriptive statistics for, I'm going to just simply click them over, or of course if I use the shift button, I can highlight a couple and I can bring them over together. So once I've got a few variables over there, I'm actually going to now take a look at some of those descriptive statistics and measures of variation. So up here on the top right, you've got the first button is called Statistics. Now we'll also talk about the charts and the format. We won't really touch on Bootstrap right now. It's something we might come back to a little bit later. But for the moment, let's just click on Statistics. Now, this is set up in a way that is, in a lot of ways, it's just very simple for us to use. All three of our measures of central tendency are right here on the top right, and we can select those. Our measures of dispersion, the standard deviation, the variance, and the range are down here on the bottom left. We even have the min, the max, and the standard error of the mean. We have the skewness and kurtosis. And then, while it doesn't actually give us the ability to calculate the interquartile range with just the click of a button, it's actually really easy for us to calculate the interquartile range by simply telling the program we want the quartiles. And then we can either eyeball it, or we could, to some extent, use a calculator to figure it out if we were really interested. So with that in mind, I'm simply going to say continue here. And for the moment, I'm going to leave this display frequency tables highlighted. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this once with it and then once without it. So I'm going to say OK here. And always remember, in SPSS, we're going to have that output file, which is going to have all of our information in it. I'm going to expand this, maximize it. And you can see that we've got one column for each of the three variables that we told the program we wanted, that we moved from the left to the right hand. So we've got age, marital status, and race of the respondent. And you can see, as I scroll down, I've got all the frequency tables for all three of those variables here as well. Now, to some extent, I don't really need all of that information if I'm just trying to talk about some descriptive statistics here. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm actually going to close this. It says, do I want to save it? I'm going to say no. And I'm simply going to go back to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies again. And now, because we haven't done anything else, all the commands that we told it before here are still here. And I'm actually going to turn off the Display Frequencies table. And once we're comfortable with the data, this is sort of a common thing to do. A lot of times we save those output files because it gives us information about what we've done and the analysis we've run. And we don't always need those frequency tables in it. They can take up a lot of room. And in the example that we have right here, we've only got three variables. One's continuous and the other two are categorical. But if we had a lot of continuous data here, we really wouldn't care about the frequency tables. We'd be more focused on what the descriptive statistics look like. So once that is unchecked, I'm simply going to say OK. And you can see we get all the information, and this time it leaves out those frequency tables that we saw down below. Now, if I wanted to, by the way, I could copy this. If I just click on it, right mouse click, I can do copy. I can do copy special. One of the things I do is, if you were thinking of saving this into a Word doc, for example, you might want to turn around and tell it to save it like as an image file instead of a text file. Formatting wise, it makes things a little bit easier. It really depends what your end goal is going to be here. For the moment, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to cancel. And you can see here your descriptive statistics, your measures of variation are all here for you to see. We've got the mean. Going across, we can see the average age of the respondents are 49.16 years, the standard error of the mean, the median, the mode, the standard deviation, the variance, the skewness, the kurtosis. Notice it also gives us the standard error of both the skewness and the kurtosis. We've got the range, the min, the max, as well as the percentiles. And those were the quartiles that we checked on before. Now, we've talked about some of this, or you've seen some of this before in your other classes. The range is really the product of the difference between the min and the max. We say the high minus the low gives us the range. So if I have one of them, I don't really need the other. For the quartiles, if we want to calculate the interquartile range, we know it's the 75th minus the 25th percentile. So in this case, that would be 62 minus 38, which would give us an interquartile range of about 28. Hope I did the math on that right. But all of the information that we need is here. Everything we want in terms of those measures of central tendency and those measures of dispersion or variability are here. Now, the one thing I just want to highlight here very quickly is that while the age of the respondent is very helpful for us because it's a continuous variable, that mean is helpful, right? That 49.16 years. Now, once we get over to things like marital status and race of respondent, that average doesn't really make sense anymore because, of course, these are categorical measures with more than two responses, which means we can't really interpret them. Race has 3 categories and marital status has more than 3 because it has married, widow, single, divorced. It has a number of different categories there. Now, this becomes even more important, I think, when you take a look at both the median and the mode. In the median for marital status is a 2. The mode is a 1. Race of respondent, the median and the mode are both equal to 1. What does that mean? Well, honestly, it just means that category is, for the mode, of course, the most common, for the median, the one in the center of the distribution. How do we interpret it? Well, that was the point I was making before about the value labels. We need to go back, and let me just click back over there real quick. We need this to be able to understand what those values stand for. So you might remember, we just saw on the screen, that for race of the respondent, both the median and the mode were equal to 1. If I look at the variable race, I go over here to values, we can see that the value of 1 corresponds to white. Now, if you also looked at your frequencies before, you could see that the white respondents made up almost 3/4 of the distribution of the General Social Survey. So it probably doesn't come as a surprise that both the median and the mode are equal to 1. But that's what we would need to be able to do to interpret those values, is to be able to go back here and take a look at what those values stood for. Now, one last thing, and then I'll stop, is that if we go back to the Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and Frequencies command, you can also see a couple of other options here. Now, if we look at Format, this is just going to demonstrate for us how the values are being reported in those frequency tables. Now, when it says ascending and descending values, it actually means ascending or descending values that have been reported. So for age, 18 through 89. For race, 1 to 3. And so you might recall, as we looked at the frequency tables before we turned them off, the values were being reported 1, 2, 3. For age, you might remember we started 18, the highest age was 89. The default is always going to be ascending values. Now, I could switch to descending values, which for age is simply going to make it 89, then 88, then 87, all the way down to 18. Or we might also want to tell it to do ascending or descending counts. And that's going to simply tell the program to give us the order based on the highest or the lowest number of responses for each of the groups. So for ascending counts, we're going to start off with the lowest number of responses in any particular group. If we go back and we look at race, it's basically going to tell us other black than white, because in terms of the percentages, that's the way it breaks down. Now, that becomes useful for us sometimes, particularly when we're trying to export the information or we're trying to tell a little story with the information. So these are a couple options that we have here. Now, the one last thing here I'll just demonstrate very quickly here is the charts button. Now, this is going to give us some very simple, no-frills charts. And again, you can see you've only got a couple options here: bar charts, pie charts, and histograms. Now, default here is always going to be none. And you can see as well for the histogram, you can get it to show a normal curve. Now, one thing to remember here is, remember that the program is kind of stupid. If you tell it you want histograms, it's going to give you histograms regardless of what the variable is. So if I run histograms now, and I will just to demonstrate, it's going to give us 3 histograms. So it's going to give us a histogram for age, which is appropriate, marital status, which is not, and race, which is absolutely not. But the program thinks if you say histograms, you want histograms for everything. By the way, it would do the same thing with bar chart and pie chart. So you can see, for example, let's try histograms first. And if I wanted, by the way, I could tell it to show the normal curve. I'm not going to bother with that right now. I'm going to say continue, then OK. And you can see that what it's basically done for us here, there we go. Sorry, I was a little slow on the uptake here. It's actually given us all of the descriptive statistics again. Remember, this isn't the one we looked at. That's actually right there. It's recreated the descriptive statistics because it's running it again. And you can see here age of respondent, marital status, and then race of respondent. Now again, these numbers don't mean very much, particularly being treated as they are right now in terms of a continuous variable. but the program isn't going to be able to sort of pick and choose which of them it's going to demonstrate. Now, if I was going to do this, I likely wouldn't include race and marital status when I tell the program to run the histogram. Vice versa, by the way. Let me go back to this one more time. If I told it pie charts, I really shouldn't do that with a variable like age, because what I end up with is something which is completely useless. You can see that the value is 18, and it can't even display all of them. It goes up to 89, but 18 through 84 are being displayed, and this pie chart is absolutely garbage. I mean, we can't look at this and use this. Marital status, on the other hand, as well as race of the respondent, are a little bit more useful for us. And certainly, I think this actually isn't a bad way to demonstrate marital status or race. Race might not need it because of only 3 categories, but it's actually a pretty good way of displaying marital status. And again, this is a simple, no-frills way to create some charts in SPSS, and it helps us quite often sort of just understand what's going on with our preliminary data. All right, that's all I really wanted to talk about in this discussion. I hope you found it helpful. Have a great day.